Whoa, 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 yeah, we are in the place to be, yeah, 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 yeah.
Is basically just the boundary of the site that they're on, which opens up a whole different types of siting as well for these kind of plants. So it's very much for real. NuScale is a fantastic success story so far, but of course we need to see them built and we need to see them come in at prices that are relevant for decarbonizing.
They also don't require power to keep the reactor safe, which was a big concern after Fukushima about disruption of power. So if it's true, but there's still unresolved is the waste question. They still have this sort of normal waste issues right there. So Stefan Quist, here in this country we have this ongoing political battle where Yucca Mountain, there's bipartisan support for it. If you're outside of Nevada, if you're inside Nevada, there's bipartisan opposition to Yucca Mountain. The full cost of that is forecast to be $100 billion. A lot of money, maybe not a lot in the grand scheme of the U.S. economy, but the waste issue is still there and it's not getting solved.
Yeah, I would caution that in my personal opinion, and looking at facts, the nuclear waste issue isn't that much of a time-pressing issue. We know very well how to handle waste safely, and once we've dealt with climate change, it's absolutely no problem to build a repository for nuclear waste if you like to. Finland has started to build theirs. The Swedish one is approved. There are methods to do this. But the amazing thing when you talk about this is that even in a country like Finland, where they're already building their approved nuclear waste repository, people still have the knee-jerk response, well, there's no way to store it. Even when you have an approved system that is being built, it's kind of almost built into people that it's not possible. We have a lot of dangerous waste coming from numerous industries that we don't know how to store safely, that needs to be stored forever, not just for a very long time, but forever, which we don't care enough about. But the nuclear waste issue we really do care about, so we have solutions for that. Now, obviously, the U.S. situation is a mess, but it's not a time-critical issue.
So, Nicholas Kristof's New York Times columnist wrote an article recently saying that 2018 was the best year ever. People are living longer and better. Literacy, child mortality. 2018, life on Earth is getting better. Steven Pinker says this. Do you agree?
Well, I'll say I'm optimistic about the future, and I think that one of the things that makes me the most optimistic is that we have clean energy technologies that can be deployed at speed and scale and are being deployed at speed and scale. Of course, we have to go faster. A statistic that I heard recently was that to stay within 2 degrees, if we started in 2000, we would need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 3% per year. If we started now, we have to reduce them by 10% per year. This is global. And then if we wait 10 more years, we have to start reducing greenhouse gases at a rate of 30% per year. Now that's a staggering statistic to me. We're not currently reducing greenhouse gas emissions, so we do need solutions that can happen at speed and scale. But if we're in such a great time where people are living longer, there's access to new information, there is new technology available to us, I think we're in a better position than we ever have been to get that going fast. And we're seeing some really interesting fast scaling resources happening around the U.S. and around the world. China is building nuclear power plants. Texas is building 3 gigawatts of solar and 5 gigawatts of wind within the next couple of years, which that's, a typical nuclear power plant is about a gigawatt. So if
where's a gigawatt to? I'm in this business. I don't understand what a gigawatt is.
Gosh, I wish I had the number of homes.
In terms of a number of a couple 100,000 homes?
I can give you a quick number. So Sweden has about 20 gigawatts of power installed for 10 million people.
Okay.
If we think of kilowatt hours, which is what people projecting forward, and this goes to people's lives improving and the poorer countries. 100,000 people a day hooking up to the grid. This is lifting people out of poverty in a big way worldwide, and these are the trends Nick Kristof is talking about, that people are getting more income and especially getting more energy. This is really great. Somebody in India can have an air conditioner and so forth. But right now, coal is the cheapest way to do that worldwide, and that's what they're turning to right now. So this 25 trillion kilowatt hours, that's today's electric grid, but that's going to grow. And then we want to start to electrify transportation while we're driving electric cars. We want to electrify building heating and industry. We want to create alternative fuels so that something like aviation fuel could be made carbon neutral. It all comes down to vast amounts of cheap, clean electricity. So that's why you need to scale up so tremendously and so quickly to get to a decarbonized world by mid-century.
You're listening to a conversation about creating clean economies around the world. This is Climate One. Coming up, questions from the audience about how to make carbon-free technologies more viable in today's energy market.
Make the other electricity sources pay their external costs. So internalize the external cost of pollution and people getting particulate matter in their lungs and dying. If you include that in the cost, that immediately changes the economic landscape.
That's up next when Climate One continues.
Houston Matters is a thoughtful conversation.
How can you not feed your kids while they're at school?
Houston Matters is engaging.
I'm happy to be home, happy to be back in Houston, but my God, that's a crazy job.
Houston Matters is your show, keeping you informed about the people, places, and things that make Houston, well, Houston. And we do it all in just an hour.
I'm Craig Cohen, host of Houston Matters. Have lunch with us weekdays at noon on News 88.7. Haven't subscribed to Marty Politics yet? Here's what you're missing. I do think this change will come, but the change will come from the top. That's from Donald Trump. I'm going to say this is, to me, an absolute fraud. He kept a good written record of the events because he feared the president would essentially lie. Our favorite thing right here in Texas is the state of California. What I think it does suggest is that there's a real lack of communication of how it's obvious, and I think that is the issue. Just when you think you know our state, you get something like that. That's Party Politics at HoustonPublicMedia.org/party. You're listening to Climate One. Greg Dalton is talking about the transition to carbon-free economies with Sonia Agarwal, Vice President of Energy at the consulting firm Energy Innovation, Joshua Goldstein, Professor Emeritus of International Relations at American University, and Stefan Fist, an energy consultant and co-author with Joshua Goldstein of A Bright Future, How Some Countries Have Solved Climate Change and the Rest Can Follow. Here's Greg.
So now I want to ask you, you're really optimist. Do you ever have moments of fear or doubt where you say, "Boy, this is scary. I don't know if we can do this at the scale"? You have moments of like, maybe my friends are all alarmists and it's not as bad as they think?
Definitely. I mean, this is a problem with quite overwhelming magnitude, especially looking at those statistics around how quickly we need to really start seeing results and bringing down greenhouse gas emissions. I sort of think of it as, how far we have to bring them down and how quickly we have to bring them down. That means that we need really to be working with everything that we're putting out there now has to be zero carbon, and we have to be letting all the technologies compete to get out there as quickly as possible that are zero carbon. So yes, the magnitude is overwhelming, but I also have a lot of faith in humanity. So
Stefan Fist, you just got off a plane from Europe. What do you personally do to have a low carbon lifestyle?
Well, I mean, the main thing I try to do is write scientific articles and books about how we can decarbonize our electricity. But I would say in my own personal defense, I haven't had a car. I had a car when I was 18 for a few months, but since then I've never had a car at all. And ironically, my electricity contract is 100% renewables. It's just because there is no 100% low carbon contract for me to buy, which is what I would like to buy, but the 100% renewable one is the second best thing, so I do that, but I also do this kind of, my family did the Christmas gift this year was carbon offsets. Not the most fun Christmas opening ceremony, but
The best stocking stuffers in the car. Joshua Goldstein, you have an interesting story for how you were inspired by a loved one to get into this. Tell us that.
Yeah, so I started as an environmentalist back in the 1970s, and I started one of the first curbside recycling programs in the country. I hated nuclear power like everybody did because it was big and technological and unnatural. And then I had children, and my son in particular, when he turned 10, he became a climate activist, and he started to just hammer on me. He's 25 now, so that's a lot of hammering. You know, climate is the issue. This is the planet you're leaving us. This is the thing you need to work on. And I'm a global trends person, so I thought, you know, about 5 years ago, okay, I will work on it. Not just the feel-good things, not the ideologies, but how am I going to turn over to my children a planet that's in good shape for them to live in?
We're going to invite you to join us for the conversation.
Thank you for having so far. This may be a little more in depth than you typically think, but you guys are pretty wide ranging. So if you owned a gas and electric utility, call it you're a director on that or CEO, whatever role you want, what would you do to decarbonize?
Sure.
So I would first take a look at my existing fleet of generation resources to understand where I'm coming from, right? So what kind of system am I operating in? I would look at over time, are we going to see a lot more electricity demand in my region? Then I would start to think about putting out technology neutral auctions for whichever zero carbon resource can come in to provide electricity that we are going to need over the next 10, 20, 30-year period. I would also make a very clear public statement about what emission reduction target I have. The sooner the better, and zero is the right answer. So then start to put together a portfolio of resources that can deliver that electricity over time at least cost and reliably. Of course, I would also, this perhaps is a little nerdy again, but looking at new tools for how you think about system management is really important right now, because we are moving into an era where we have a lot more variable resources on the generation side. We have a lot more opportunities for deploying resources more flexibly, for thinking about how do we smartly electrify everything, how do we make sure that people can charge their cars at home and feel comfortable with their heating and cooling, and do so in a way that's going to be the most efficient for the individual and for the system and as an integrated whole.
Let's go to our next question. Welcome.
Like Joshua Goldstein, I became an environmentalist in the 70s and hated nuclear power, and have sort of come around on it. But hearing what you're saying here, what's the one big driver that we would need to change in order to try and make that a viable technology in this country?
Well, I mean, there are multiple steps. The first one, the most obvious one, is to make the other electricity sources, energy sources, pay their external costs. So you internalize the external cost of pollution and people getting particulate matter in their lungs and dying. If you include that in the cost of competing electricity generation, such as natural gas and coal, that immediately changes the economic landscape. But what you also need to do is, whenever you have a portfolio standard or a Green New Deal or whatever, that needs to be goal-oriented. So if you want to have low emissions, that should be the goal, not how many of your favorite energy sources you build. So if you include nuclear in all of those standards in the deals, and you include the external costs, and then you need to invite the Koreans to come and build 15 identical plants, one after the other, at $2,000 per kilowatt, and then
The economic piece of this is really important. If you want to build out nuclear power, it's got to be a different model than what we have now. And you talk about the solar and wind costs coming down so radically, which is really impressive and great. But you need the same thing happening with nuclear power, you know, at scale efficiencies of repeating the same thing over and over and over and bringing the cost down. It was a quip from a Nuclear Regulatory Commission chair decades ago that the French have 100 kinds of cheese and 2 kinds of nuclear reactors, and in the United States the situation is reversed. So there's, you know,
And the companies that build the nuclear reactors like it very much, thank you, because they make some good money on that. Let's go to our next question.
Hi, my question is about nuclear storage. So you mentioned that Finland is doing it right now, but I'm wondering, has anyone created modeling that would show, okay, if we were going to make the entire energy grid in the world part renewables and part nuclear and part hydro, that would we really have enough space to store all of that, all the nuclear waste? And I hear you guys on, the fact that we need to focus on reducing carbon right now, and then we can worry about nuclear. But I'm trying to wrap my head around the space issue.
Yeah, sure. That's an excellent question. And this is, it's kind of a shame that you don't have any publicly accessible nuclear facility here. In my home country, we don't have NIMBY. We don't have one in my backyard for this. We had, in my backyard, there were 8 municipalities fighting to be the location where we store our nuclear waste. And what you see when you go and visit the facility where this waste is stored now, for a country, it's, let's say, an average U.S. state size that got half of its electric power for the last 40 years of nuclear power. That's stored in a swimming pool. That's the volume of that waste. And so it's absolutely staggering how little of it there is. And so we definitely won't run out of space, but it's also an interesting question of we can't do nuclear because we need to store the waste, because if this was a question in 1942, then that would make sense, but you already have nuclear waste, so you already need storage. It's a done deal for the US and for most countries that use energy. You already need storage. The only question is, do you need a little bit more of it or not? And that's a much easier question to ask than do you need it at all?
And you also, people don't like it moving around on trains through their neighborhood. Moving it is highly, highly political. Let's go. Yeah, Sonia.
Just one thing. I actually worked on accident prevention at a nuclear power plant earlier in my career in Ohio, where I grew up. And I'll just say, a lot of it in the United States, the volume is very small. That's absolutely right. But it is stored on site at the nuclear facilities because of this issue that we've had with not having somewhere to put it in this country. But it is, all the spent fuel rods are down there at the bottom of that swimming pool inside the plant. And then if they're not there, they're in dry paths right behind the plant. So there's definitely, in places where you don't have a publicly accessible place to put the nuclear waste, there becomes some more that needs to get stored on site. So that's another consideration.
Let's go to our next question. Welcome to Climate One.
Hi, thank you. I work on complex systems analysis, and one thing, if we look at the bigger picture and we work backwards from actually succeeding, I think Sonia Agarwal did a really important fact, something on the order of 10% reduction per year is necessary globally. Another really important fact, very briefly, is about 3,800 entities, might be a little rough, emit over 80% of global emissions. So we can guess what those are. Big corporations, oil companies, states, militaries, things like that. Obviously, if we can't get that 80% on board, there's no way the other 20% can succeed at creating 10% or more emission reduction, which is just massive. So I just wonder if any of you could say something to this massive elephant of the dominant economic political system in the world that is shoring up the 3,800, which shores up things like waste and efficiency, but also, frankly, luxury emissions, massive emissions for things that we just can't afford.
I'd like to tackle the big systems question.
Well, I would just say the number one thing to start with is China. If you want to deal with the smallest number of actors that have the biggest impact, one person, Xi Jinping, could wake up tomorrow and declare that he's going to take coal off of China's grid and replace it with nuclear power, and at a Swedish rate, it would take down world carbon emissions by about 12%. That's a big thing for just one decision. So that's where you'd start.
Yeah, I think it's the key question, right? I think the first thing we all need to do is not shut off our low carbon energy that we have. That's really the step one. Don't shut off what works and then build new. But I think, just as a comment on those individual organizations, they are loving the fight between clean energy sources. They are loving the 100% renewables that are anti-nuclear. This is their favorite thing in the world, that the clean energy sources that are supposed to displace them are internally fighting.
next question.
Yeah, speaking about Sweden having hydro, is the debate of hydro not being fully renewable died out? Is it finished? Is it really fully renewable? Because that debate in the Stockholm Water Conference comes up all the time. So you seems to be assuming that hydro is 100% renewable. Is that correct?
Thank you. So, Stefan, hydro isn't renewable, and also in a weather-disrupted world, hydro may not be as reliable as it has been in the past.
Yeah, so I think the term renewable is not a very good one. It doesn't mean that something's clean or sustainable. I think everyone agrees it's renewable in the terms that water comes back renewably. But actually, Sweden started its own technology not from the perspective of climate, but in general the started. One of the main drivers to start it, to go to nuclear, was to protect the last 4 free rivers in Sweden. We built hundreds of hydroelectric power plants that dammed up those rivers. And so people were getting really nervous that we wouldn't have any free-flowing rivers. And so how could we get out of that situation? Obviously, the cost points of solar and wind in the 70s were, there were people saying 100% renewables then too, but that was a weaker argument than it is today. So we could go to oil and coal, and we could go to nuclear, but it was one of the main arguments was that the environmental impacts of hydroelectric power are quite immense, and people wanted to save rivers. But it's definitely renewable. It's not always sustainable or good for the environment. So that's a case-by-case basis, I think. All of this is choosing the least bad alternative. Everything has negatives.
Greg Dalton has been talking about how some countries are going carbon-free with Stefan Fist, an energy consultant and co-author of A Bright Future, how some countries have solved climate change. Joshua Goldstein, Professor Emeritus of International Relations at American University and co-author with Stefan Fist of A Bright Future. And Sonia Agarwal, Vice President of Energy at consulting firm Energy Innovation. To hear all our Climate One conversations, subscribe to our podcast at our website, climateone.org, where you'll also find photos, video clips, and more. If you like the program, please let us know by writing a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us next time for another conversation about energy, the economy, and the environment.
Climate One is a special project of the Commonwealth Club of California. Kelly Pennington and Sarah Catherine Coxon run our audience engagement. Tyler Reed is our producer. The audio engineers are Mark Kirshner and Justin Norton. Annie Chelsea and Devin Stoyevich edit the show. I'm Greg Dalton, the executive producer and host. The Commonwealth Club CEO is Dr. Gloria Duffy. Climate One is produced in association with KQED Public Radio.
Build a deeper connection with your customers through corporate sponsorship of Houston Public Media. I'm Josh Adams, Executive Director of Operations. You can reach over 1 million decision makers on multiple platforms. I'm a corporate sponsor. Learn more at HoustonPublicMedia.org/sponsor. Hi, this is Steve Inskeep with NPR's Morning Edition, which reminds you of the power of one human voice. Whether you're on the radio some morning or your device in your Morning Edition, you hear one person telling a story from the other side of the world, from a neighborhood near you, and that voice brings you understanding of the news. Listen to Morning Edition.
Morning Edition, weekdays 5 to 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
This is your NPR station, Houston Public Media, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, and KUHT TV 8.6 Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Starting out in dorm rooms and garages, innovators moved to Silicon Valley to connect the world.
6,000 startups on average in any given year, 39 of the Fortune 1000 companies.
Now Facebook, Apple, and Google are all giant corporations that are affecting human behavior and even elections. Critics of these tech companies are asking questions.
We looked at what came out of Silicon Valley and it looked like magic. And now we're looking and saying, wait a second,
start right after the news.
Hello, I'm Chris Barrow with the BBC News. The Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has promised to call an early election and not stand again if he's re-elected next month. Mr. Bouteflika has now formally registered as a candidate, despite days of nationwide protests against his decision to seek a fifth term. Yusuf Taha has the details.
The president's campaign manager submitted election papers on his behalf ahead of a midnight deadline. He read out a letter from Mr. Bouteflika, who remains in Switzerland undergoing medical checks. In it, the president said he had listened to protesters and would begin a national dialogue if elected for a fifth term, promising to implement his recommendations for reform. He also pledged to call fresh elections within a year in which he would not stand. He said he was running for re-election this time to ensure a smooth transition of power.
The chief financial officer of China's tech giant Huawei is suing the Canadian government over her arrest at Vancouver Airport last year. Meng Wanzhou was detained at the request of the US, who want to extradite her on suspicion of fraud and violating trade sanctions against Iran. Lee Carter reports from Toronto.
In the civil claim against the Canadian border authorities, the government and the police, the Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou alleges her constitutional rights were violated when she was taken into custody last December at Vancouver's airport. Ms. Meng filed the civil claim on Friday, the same day Canadian authorities announced the extradition process to the US can go ahead. The document states that she is seeking damages for arbitrary and unlawful imprisonment.
Estonia's opposition centre-right Reform Party has won the country's parliamentary elections, with its leader Kaja Kallas poised to become the country's first female prime minister. With more, here's Kat Wiener.
The polls have predicted a tight race. In the event, the pro-business and strongly Europhile Reform Party garnered just under 29% of the vote, ahead of the governing centre-left Centre Party. In third place was the far-right anti-immigrant and Eurosceptic ECRE, which was boosted by rural votes, more than doubling its previous showing to just under 18%. However, no party has enough votes to govern alone. If, as seems likely, Ms. Kallas is nominated as Prime Minister, she may struggle to form a government, having ruled out entering into coalition with ECRE.
A 50-year-old man who says he was molested by the Australian Cardinal George Pell in the 1970s will file a civil lawsuit later today in Melbourne. The man was a resident for 4 years in St Joseph's Boys' Home in Ballarat, where he says he was abused by Pell. The Cardinal was found guilty by a jury in December of abusing 2 boys at Melbourne's Cathedral in 1996. He maintains his innocence and is challenging his conviction. He's due to be sentenced later this month. World news from the BBC. A committee in the US House of Representatives is seeking documents alleging obstruction of justice, corruption and abuse of power by President Donald Trump and his aides. The Judiciary Committee's chairman, Gerald Nadler, said it had requested information from more than 60 people. But the Democratic congressman said starting the process of impeaching Mr. Trump was a long way down the road. The British Ministry of Justice has confirmed that the UK's first prison unit for transgender inmates is to open this week. It'll be housed in a women's prison in South London and will initially cater for 3 offenders who were born male but have since changed gender. Danny Shaw reports.
The management of transgender prisoners has proved to be increasingly problematic for the Ministry of Justice. Last year, the department apologised for failings which allowed Karen White, a convicted sex offender who was born male but who identified as a woman, to be held in jail alongside vulnerable female inmates. 2 of them were sexually assaulted. Since then, ministers have been reviewing their arrangements and have decided to open a special unit. It'll house 3 former male prisoners who have gender recognition certificates certifying that they're now women.
The President of the Marshall Islands, Hilda Heine, says the government has no plans to relocate the population as a response to climate change.
The whole thing has blown up and is under all sorts of investigation, including for fraud and misleading investors, and people's lives were at stake. So in 1983, there was a company called Diasonics, the biggest IPO of that time, $123 million. It was a company that was going to make it possible to do digital x-rays and computers to do things like ultrasounds. And it turned out to be very much the same thing. The
more dialogical into the conversation.
PhD.
I'm looking for my opportunity. I'm feeling very dialogical tonight. We have a question from Mei Lin at People-Centered Internet. And Mei Lin asks, to define the moral compass, do we need new codes of ethics for humanity in this age of digital